Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Tuesday, November 25th, which makes this the news and events for Monday, November 24th, day 1370 of the 3-day special military operation. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, coming to you live from this major European capital currently under siege. And I see the peeps are coming in. There's Nightshade. There's Lars. How you guys doing tonight? Hey, Debbie. Hey, Feisty. Hey, Refurb Man. You're early. Hey, Bjorn. Hey, Eli. Hey, Birdie, Anthony. Hey, Chrissy Locks. How's everybody doing tonight? Hey, Coffin. Hey, Akron. Ooh, it's gone too fast to read. Ooh. Everybody's coming in. Hey, Paul. Hey, Robert Stewart Key. Little Red. Dr. K, are you back? Do you want to say hello? You got your earphones in? Hey, Laddie. Hey, Dino. Hey, Dave. Gary, Kid. How's everybody doing tonight? What a weekend, huh? Hey, G2. Hey, Sarah. Unbelievable. I really want to talk. So tonight, what I really want to do is I want to talk about the 28-point peace scam. Because that's clearly the thing. I want to talk more about its origins, how we got here, and what the Russian response to it has been. Because I think the Russian response is very telling. And so the peace plan is dead, right? Everybody knows that. The White House has backed off the Thursday deadline. That's no longer a thing. This is just our first offer. Right? We went from sign by Thursday to this is just our first offer. So thank God, right? Like by some small grace of God, the worst of this may be over. We'll see. Hey, Neil Stephen. I do want to thank... went right out of my head. Oh, Derek Sands. I don't know. I didn't see Derek Sands come in. Hey, Parta, but it was going pretty fast there. So if Derek Sands is here, Derek is the sponsor of tonight's live. Thank you, Derek. And everybody say thanks if we see Derek come in. Or if he's here, I don't know. So last night, overnight, we saw the Russians send 169 drones at Ukraine. 125 of them were intercepted. That's about an 80% interception rate. Good interception rate. Now, as Chet correctly says, hey, super user, that peace scam was dead on arrival for the Ukrainians. To quote one of the Ukrainian members of parliament, the size of our military, our lands, our borders, I guess I'm paraphrasing, these will never be acceptable conditions. We're not giving away land. We're not reducing the size of our military to a point where we cannot defend ourselves. Even though I heard a really interesting analysis today that after the war, it's unlikely that the Ukrainians will even be able to have an army of 600,000. It's likely it will be 500,000 men. But the point is, it's not up to Moscow to decide, right? It's up to the Ukrainians. That's who it's up to. So it appears to me, right, and I don't know if the doc is still here or not, but on Friday's live, when Dr. K was our guest, she mentioned the words reflexive control. And reflexive control is, hey, Van, Reflexive control is a technique that the Soviets used, right? You give someone information to get them to do what you want them to do. Like the old man with the well. Have you heard this story? There's an old man, his well has run dry, he needs to dig a new well. So he says to a young man, when I was young, when I was your age, we stole all this gold and we buried it right over there. If you dig it up for me, I will give you half of it. Now, the young man says, why would you give me half? Why didn't you never dig it up before? And the old man says, well, I'm old now. My wife is dead. My kids are gone. And my well has run dry. So I have to start a new life. I have to get the money out. I need it now. So the kid digs and digs and digs and digs and digs for the gold. There is no gold, of course. But when he's done, there's a well. And now the old man has a well. And he says, you can have half of the liquid gold, just like I promised you. Reflexive control. You get somebody to do something for you by giving them information that you want them to have. And it appears that this entire 28-point peace scam is nothing but an exercise in reflexive control, or at least the leaking of it was. The reality is that we've heard from the White House that they first got this plan before the Alaska meeting. There's an investigative journalist in Germany, whose name escapes me right now, but works for Der Spiegel, who claims to have seen a 30-point plan remarkably similar to this 6 months ago from the Russians. And of course it came from the Russians because the Russians wrote it. Now, that's really the first thing I think that we need to talk about, is who wrote this document and how do we know? Because we had very different stories come out of the White House this week. Or out of the White House, the State Department, and Congress. The first thing that happened after these documents leaked, and they are being called a leak, and if in fact the White House has had them for as long as 6 months, and we're just finding out about it now, then yeah, it's a leak. Who claims it was a leak? Well, General Keith Kellogg does. General Keith Kellogg claimed on X that these documents had been leaked by K, and that K is likely, the internet seems to agree, that K is likely not our own doc, but rather Kirill Dmitriev, who runs the Sovereign Wealth Fund for the Russian Federation, and has been one of the key negotiators, if they can be called such, on Ukraine. Marco Rubio, according to Senator Mike Rounds, Republican Trump supporter from South Dakota, and on the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Rounds made the claim that when these documents were leaked, the Intelligence Committee had a phone call from Marco Rubio. And in his capacity as, I think he's doing double duty right now, right, as Secretary of State and NSA, National Security Advisor, he briefed them on this 28-point scam. So now, according to a sitting U.S. senator, a Republican, a Trump ally, Marco Rubio gets on the phone with them and tells them, this is not our plan, after Donald Trump had insisted that he sign it by Thursday and that it was his plan. It's just our first draft of Russian demands from the Russians. According to Senator Mike Rounds, this is what Marco Rubio told the Senate Intelligence Committee. Now, for me, that seems very believable. All of that tracks. But Rubio comes out the next day and says, no, what Senator Mike Rounds said never happened. Well, he didn't say it quite like that. What he said was the exact opposite of what he told Rounds the day before. This is an American plan. We did write this. This is ours. Despite the fact that General Ben Hodges, who we talk about here all the time, who's got real insight into what's happening in Ukraine and in Europe, I think, and Andrew Neil, who's a former editor for the Sunday Times of London and a BBC reporter for 40 years, Andrew Neil says, and Ben Hodges says as well, the people that they know that do AI analysis claim to not only know that this was translated from Russian to English using some AI tool, they claim to be able to tell you which one it was based on the common error matrices known to the various AI platforms. And because of things like bureaucratic phrasing like denazification of Ukraine, things that only a Russian could utter because they are so divorced from reality, appearing in this document. The consensus is that this was originally written in Russian and has been translated using AI to English, and that AI has made all the mistakes that we've come to expect it to make. So in the intelligence world, there seems to be no disagreement that this document was originally written in Russian. How, therefore, could it be the Trump plan? It can't be the Trump plan. But why on earth would Kirill Dmitriev leak this document and try to make it the Trump plan, the American plan? I think the answer can be found in the Russian papers. I mean, right off the bat, I think that there are a couple of things that releasing this document just now does. It is a huge morale hit to the Ukrainian people. Make no mistake, the Ukrainians are reeling from this. They are feeling thrice beat. It's like when Peter betrayed Jesus 3 times, denied him 3 times. This is now the 3rd major betrayal of Ukraine by the Tangerine Palpatine. So there's a huge morale hit to the Ukrainians and the psyche here. Then there is the chaos, the utter chaos that's happening inside of the Europe political world right now. It's like he kicked an anthill. It's like Putin kicked an anthill. And the Europeans are running around like mad. What's his name? Alexander Stubb, the president or prime minister of Finland, and Maloney from Italy are both getting on planes tonight to go to D.C. to do their jobs as Trump whisperers, to try to talk him down from this nightmare. And worst of all, I think worst of all, you've got the Europeans meeting in Geneva and taking this document seriously. This document of maximalist Russian goals designed purely to humiliate Ukraine, rehabilitate Russia in the eyes of the world, and isolate the Europeans from the decision-making is a major benefit to the Kremlin. And so you have this geopolitical chaos, which serves the Kremlin. You have the morale hit in Ukraine, which serves the Kremlin. And you have, by claiming that it's Trump's plan, you have the security guarantees the panache, the standing, the global standing of the American seal of approval. Because it's not just your plan that America approves, it's America's plan. And how could there be anything wrong with America's plan? So it gets legitimized. At the same time, I really want you to listen to this, guys. I think that this is so revealing of what's happening right now with this thing. The following are thanks to Steve Rosenberg, our man in Moscow. I picked some of his jewels today, and notice the pattern. Notice the patterns. The Russian papers are speaking with one voice. It is the voice of the state and the official state position. And so we'll start with Moskovsky Komsomolsk. The chances of Ukraine's leadership signing a peace plan this week by Thanksgiving are minimal. And if an agreement is signed, it won't be executed on the ground, since this is only possible. Are you ready for this? Since this is only possible if there are occupational patrols on the streets of Kyiv. Now what? So we continue fighting. In a separate article, with the highest degree of probability, the European Ukrainian gang will correct Trump's plan. There it is. It's not the Russian plan. It's not a plan written by the Russians in Russian, dictated to the Americans, but it's Trump's plan. The European Ukrainian gang will correct, in quotes, Trump's plan in such a way that it becomes completely unacceptable to Russia. So attempts to force Kyiv into peace will continue. Do you see the pattern? Moscow is telling us that they're not, look, Putin can't stop this war. He can't stop it. He has written into the Constitution of the Russian Federation that Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson are Russia. But he can't capture all of them. He's never going to capture all of them. It's not going to happen. And so the war cannot stop until the land he has already said is Russia has been taken by force. And that's not going to happen. It's taken them 22 months now, 22 months since the fall of Avdiivka, to go 63 kilometers, 40 miles to Pokrovsk. 24 months, that's half of the full-scale invasion, to get 40 miles. And they're still not there yet. They still don't have Pokrovsk or Kupiansk, by the way. Now, in these first two quotes, what you should notice is that the propaganda is telling the Russian people, there will be no peace. We will keep fighting. That's all there is. That's all there is. Oh, and it's Trump's plan, by the way. Komsomolskaya Pravda. There's a foreign affairs opinion piece by a foreign affairs expert. Let's be honest, quotes, let's be honest. We've been here 3 or 4 times before. We start by saying, it's incredible. The Americans have agreed to everything we want and presented the Ukrainians with a fait accompli. We've seen how that ended in the past. Now there is no reason to believe the special military operation will end this year. Again, Russia has no intention of accepting this peace plan. Even if we gave them everything, they wouldn't take it. They can't just stop the war. So real skepticism from this guy. Now, in his Ivestia, quote, regarding the version of the peace plan that will eventually be presented to the Kremlin after U.S. consultation with the Ukrainians and Europeans, it's unclear how different it will be from the 28-point draft Russia has now. Now, it's worth mentioning at this time that, as I understand it, negotiations in Geneva have whittled the 28-point peace plan down to 19 points so far. Now, again, I consider this an exercise in foolishness to even consider this list of maximalist Russian demands that any departure from the Kremlin is sure to reject. Indeed, the Kremlin could reject them if accepted whole cloth. I think it's an absolute futile effort. Trying to convince Donald Duck is a futile effort. It is my considered opinion that Europe and the Ukrainians should sideline the Americans. I hate to say it, I'm sorry to say it, but a recent report from Dutch intelligence made it clear that as soon as they shared certain intelligence with the United States shared it with the Kremlin. The United States government is currently in an active coup. The Kremlin is running Washington. We have to take our heads out of the sand and recognize that that is what's happening. Okay, so back to Izvestia. The 28-point draft Russia has now, right? So it'll be very different from what they have now. What's more, once again, ready? There is a considerable risk of disruption to the negotiation track. Brussels and Kyiv, blaming it on the EU, blaming it on Kyiv, do not conceal their indignation at several provisions in the plan and are trying to come up with their own more pro-Ukrainian plan. In the end, Moscow may receive an updated draft that will be very different from the one the Americans sent. It says it's right there, from the one the Americans sent. Do you see the pattern? It's important that the Russian people understand. It's not that we, the poor victim of the awful Ukrainians, made a bunch of insane demands that no rational person would ever entertain, but rather the very reasonable Americans have put forth these statements that this is a reasonable plan. I'm with you, Championess. I'm with you. The best plan is for Russia to go the fuck home. Maybe very different from the ones the Americans sent. I cannot be excluded in, it cannot be excluded in Geneva. A draft will appear containing conditions unacceptable to Russia. That's the third time now in 3 different papers. The commentator writes that it's likely that the next draft will contain points that are unacceptable to Russia. They're preparing everybody for the failure of this plan, and it's their plan. But it's not their plan. This is not what they really want. What they really want is to see how far they can push the Europeans. Right now, what's happening in Geneva, by whittling it down to 19 points, the Europeans are saying to the Russians, here are the 19 things we will give you. And here are the 9 that we will not. That is a bad place to begin your negotiations from. It's a very bad place. Rossiyskaya Gazetia, the state newspaper, wrote the negative reactions to, are you ready for it? Trump's plan, coming from Britain, France, and Germany leave no doubt that these are the countries heading the undeclared war against Russia. This is why they aren't just requesting, they are demanding that they must take part in any peace deal with Moscow. In Kommersant, they write, Kyiv's EU allies are trying to add corrections. Third time we've seen the word corrections used to Trump's Ukraine plan, right? Everybody calls it Trump's plan, the plan the Americans sent us, Trump's Ukraine plan, but it's all the same thing. It's not our plan. It's the Americans' plan. That should be acceptable to everybody. Why isn't it? Clearly, it's the fault of the Europeans and the Ukrainians. Kyiv's EU allies are trying to add corrections to Trump's Ukraine plan that would make it unacceptable to Moscow. That's 4 different papers with basically the same statements in them. One last one. In Nezavimaya Gazetia, they write, the vague clause in the American peace plan about a non-aggression pact between Russia and Europe and Ukraine requires such work that right now it seems a fantasy. A future clash is inevitable. Get this, a future clash is inevitable unless during the breather, one of the participants is so weakened by internal turmoil that it exits the battlefield without war. Now, of the 2 participants in the conflict, the one more deeply embroiled in internal turmoil, the one with the eggshell economy, the one that has just suffered probably the most significant hit to its logistics. And I'm talking about the civilian economy. One of the most significant hits to its logistics since the start of the war, the essential or effective closure of the Kazakhstan border. So we've talked a little bit about this before. There was a big backup at the Kazakh border. They weren't letting any dual-use goods through. This is a critical logistics hub and supply route from China, especially for dual-use goods like chips that can be used in missiles or microwaves. Kazakhstan has essentially closed the border again under fear of secondary sanctions. And I think because of calls recently by Moscow to bomb Kazakhstan, a longtime partner and friend. But they were blaming the Kazakhs for drone strikes across the border. Nonsense. Well, we don't really know, but it appears to be nonsense. The closure of the Kazakh border is a big deal. Russia's already got a fragile economy. Major logistics routes for Russian businesses have now been stopped dead in their tracks. And reports are that warehouses are emptying as new goods can't get into the country. Whole shipments of food are rotting on the border or expiring on the border. At this time, this critical time, when Russia's economy is so fragile, when we get reports that from the Far East, all order has broken down in places like northern Kamchatka, where regional warlords now control their own border crossings from what they're calling Russia into warlord territory, whatever. Because these guys always name it after themselves, right? This notion that the Russian paper would write these words, that during the breather, one of the participants isn't so rocked by internal turmoil that it must leave the field of battle, without saying, unless the Ukrainians are so consumed by internal turmoil? Why does it say one of the participants? That's an amazingly vague comment that if one were to question it, the author could say, well, comrade, it's obvious which of the two would leave the battlefield. To even question which of the two would be treason. Right? It's that vague, and yet it leaves the door open to speculation about who it is that is too weak to return to the battlefield. After welcoming home hundreds of thousands of violence, addicted, sadists, psychopaths, and sociopaths who have just been granted access to unlimited violence on the Ukrainian people. You're now going to bring them home and pay them 1/10 of what they were earning doing what they love so much. That is a recipe for disaster, and Russia knows it, which is one of the reasons why casualty rates do not matter to the Russians. They will not have these people home. There's even been some discussion about plans to keep them in Ukraine permanently, right? Some way of locking them up with jobs in Ukraine and keeping them here rather than letting them return home because they pose too great a risk to civilian society. The 28-point peace scam. Why do I think it's been around for a long time? It's my opinion, based on the available evidence here, and I hope that it has convinced you, that the Russians wrote this document. They wrote it at least 6 months ago, delivered it to Trump at least 3 months ago. And the recent leak of it was to derive some of the benefits that I mentioned, probably, right? Like that list of benefits accrued to Russia by releasing it at this time. Morale hit on Ukraine, geopolitical chaos in Europe, and the validation and legitimacy of the American stamp on it. As well as for the domestic audience to explain why the war is not going to end next week and why we have to keep fighting and whose fault it is. Not ours. So all of those benefits accrue to the Kremlin by releasing this information now. If in fact they have had it, that is to say, the Americans have had it for at least 3 months, more likely 6 or more, it would certainly explain, I think, why Trump reportedly had a screaming match with Zelensky the last time they met. It would also explain why the generals and the Secretary of the Army Driscoll that met with Zelensky on Friday here in Kyiv are said to have strong-armed him, put pressure on him to accept this peace deal and sign it toot sweet, or we would cut off all military aid and intelligence sharing, critically the intelligence sharing. Now, of course, we're not sending weapons now, so that's not much of a threat. But to threaten to withdraw from the Pearl Initiative so that the Europeans can't purchase weapons on behalf of Ukraine, that's a real threat. And of course, the intelligence sharing is a real threat. It is said that in Friday's meeting, the old lines that we've heard from the Donald before, you got to make a deal or you won't have a country left, were repeated again insultingly to President Zelensky. If, in fact, the Americans have had this plan all this time, then all of those things make sense, especially Putin recently saying, after this was disclosed, that we will consider this plan because Donald Trump has failed to get Ukraine to agree. Right? It was something like that Putin said. Donald Trump. Now, if Putin has been waiting around for 2 months or 3 months since Alaska for Trump to figure out a way to force Ukraine to accept these terms, then that statement from Putin certainly makes sense. He's frustrated that it's taking so long. And it could also be a threat. If, in fact, Putin has some way to damage Trump, it could well have been a threat. Hey, asshole, you were given orders because I believe the White House is being run out of the Kremlin today. We are in an active coup. The federal system of government in the United States is subverted by a malign foreign agent. And we got to get our head out of the sand around that fact, in my opinion. So it makes sense that Putin would be pissed and would be threatening Trump. And that Trump, because shit rolls downhill, Trump would then threaten Ukraine. So, hey, Dana, how you doing? So, guys, that's what I have on the 28-point peace scam. I believe it was written by the Russians, in Russian, dictated to Witkoff, passed up to Witless, who then tried to force it down the Ukrainians' throats on more than one occasion. And now we are here. Okay. So questions, comments. Again, I want to thank Derek Sands, who is the sponsor of this live. Thank you, Derek. Hey, Jeff. And I want to thank Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces, and, of course, the best moderator team on the Tickety Talk, Maddie, Feisty, Roy Daniels, and Travis. Thanks, guys. Why is U.S. intelligence not figuring out the Russian takeover of the White House? Who's to say they haven't? Who's to say that half the people in the intelligence aren't looking over their shoulders at the other half? Because there's Russian agents inside of the national security services. We know there are because Trump appointed them. Happy birthday, Van. Come on, you cheap bastard. Sponsor a live. I'll give you birthday wishes. Come on. Cash in one of those fucking Krugerrands you got in the safety deposit box, you son of a bitch. They're $4,000 a piece now. Happy birthday, Van. South Africans, you got to know how to talk to them. Trump has blood on his hands. You're goddamn right he does. He's trying to figure out how to work out Venezuela first. You're not wrong, Ben. I mean, the whole Venezuela thing is really disturbing to me. The whole idea that Americans are engaging in extrajudicial killings is always anathema, I think, to a democratic spirit. I will say this about Venezuela that I think it's important that we understand. The blockade of Venezuela that's currently underway by American forces, and it's an effective blockade. The kind of oil that comes out of Venezuela requires mixing with a very light kind of fuel oil called naphtha. Have you guys heard of this, naphtha? So the Venezuelans, in order to sell their oil, have to mix it with naphtha. Then they can sell it on the open market. I think it's something called a sweet crude. Here's the problem. They get all their naphtha from the Russians. And there's now 4 Russian tankers that have been blockaded with like 2 million barrels of oil, of naphtha on them, that can't get into Venezuelan ports. If the Venezuelans don't get their hands on that Russian naphtha, they can't sell their oil. And if the Russians can't get their naphtha to the Venezuelans, they're not getting paid. That's another capillary in the oil blood money flow to the Kremlin, snipped, bleeding out at sea. Bloomberg estimates that the Russians probably have 500 million, 500 million barrels of oil on ships currently at sea with nowhere to go, no customers to take it. Are Russian troops training Venezuelan troops in combat? Nanopam, it was my understanding that some of the Africa Corps was recently dispatched there. So these are not Russian army troops, but rather these are the paramilitary group, the Africa Corps, that reorganized the Wagner in Africa. So they're Russians, and they're in Venezuela, and they're doing training, but they're not Russian army. Musk has set Twitter to show the origin of posts. He hates Trump now. Well, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know what these people feel. I think they mostly hate everybody, including themselves. But he turned that feature off, was my understanding. Once it showed that, half the big MAGA influencers are Russian bots, once it showed that to the world, he turned it off almost immediately. Trump is definitely compromised by Putin, Chrissy Locks. I agree. Also note how Marjorie Taylor Greene suddenly turned normal right as Russian money starts drying up. Yeah, you're not kidding, pal. You are not kidding. She is a slippery one, boy. Hello, Chris. There's a great deal of Republican infighting now because classic American Reagan-era Republicans hate Russia, do not trust Russia, see Russia as our enemy. Then you have this whole maggot cult that has been sucking on the teat of Russian propaganda for 15 years and getting high on that supply. And they love Russia. Not only Trump, also Musk appointed a bunch of them everywhere inside the government when he started. Yep. I mean, on Trump's demands, I don't think any of them are Musk's. I mean, maybe some of them are owned by Musk. That would make sense, actually. U.S. must vote Democratic in the midterms. Violet, I don't have any confidence we're going to have midterms. I have no confidence that there will be midterms. If Trump can stop them by declaring martial law or a state of emergency, you can bet he will. If he can't, we have a much more serious problem, frankly. Scott Leidenbeck, who is a Republican operative billionaire, just bought Dominion Voting Systems. A Republican operative now owns the voting machines in 27 American states. I mean, if you haven't called your governor's office about this yet, or your state election board about this yet, you should. Oh, my live has been restricted. Hold on. My live does not contain the content I am accused of. Okay, let's see who's got a St. Petersburg IP address, shall we? Okay, let's see here. So yeah, no, I'm very worried about the midterms. Common Sense confirms the Bloomberg article of $500 million. The Dutch refine Venezuelan oil on the islands of Curacao and Aruba. I have no idea. They may. They might be the first army to lose to the I don't know what that means. Peter, in your opinion, is this revised deal put together by Europe any better? No. I think it was a huge waste of time. I think they should have thrown the entire deal out, and they should wait for Ukraine to determine what the conditions of Russian surrender are. That's what I think should happen. And then give Ukraine what it needs to make Russia agree to the surrender conditions Ukraine sets. Even though Putin said essentially all Wagner are Russian military. Yeah, Wagner is Russian army now. Well, we can argue. Yeah, I'm not going to argue about that. Yeah, the Europe deal is terribly good to Russia for some reason. The Europe deal is terribly good to Russia because they started with the Russian demands. Not the way to do it. Throw that shit in the fucking wastebasket of history and give Ukraine the weapons they need to bring Russia to its knees. They're close. Hey, twisted genius. Unlike our stable genius in the White House, I prefer a twisted genius. NATO should sit on their hands too. NATO is sitting on its hands. Could the small boats that's getting blown up be Russian? Highly unlikely. In the one case, we seem to be aware that one of the boats was just some Colombian fishermen. Just some poor bastards in the wrong place at the wrong time. MAGA has gone to Russia, and about 2,275 Americans have picked up and gone to Russia on the so-called values visa, which is their escape from the homosexual trans indoctrination of America. I mean, Jesus Christ, who thinks anybody is trying to turn anybody queer? That they're not just saying, hey, these are people too who deserve equal protection under the law. That's all. That's all it is. To turn it into some attack on you says a lot more about you than it does about them. Alice, you're not wrong. She has waited to leave Congress until her pension is fully vested. However, so she'll get a full pension. However, there are also age restrictions with that. So that pension will not kick in for, I don't know, 13 or 14 years, something like that. Yeah, sure, Republicans are ready to abandon their seats. This is a nightmare. Full Russian retreat is the only acceptable solution. I agree. No deal is better than a bad deal. I'm with you. Voting by mail is good. It's so weird to me that Trump voted by mail his whole career and only now thinks it's a problem. Pravit Oksana. In Soviet Russia, voting machine picks you. Arizona is removing any machines connected to the Republicans. Oh, is Joey dropped by too? Or are you just scrolling through, Joe? Why doesn't anyone ask Zelensky what they want? Exactly. This war really takes its toll on you. Oh, I know. I've really aged in 3 years. It's really terrible. Any chance that the U.S. will switch sides to support Russia? You mean, is there any chance the U.S. will switch sides and support Ukraine? Because right now all we're doing is supporting Russia. EU should be more assertive against Russia in support of Ukraine above all now. Agreed. U.S. bro got sent to the front. You're thinking of Derek Huffman. He is at the front now. There'll be more of them. There'll be more of those stories. Yeah, no, I wouldn't set foot in Russia either. What weapons does Ukraine need to win? Well, I don't know if you can hear it because the door's closed. But hear it? The air raid's just going off. I expected a big one last night. Usually Sunday night is when they come because they want us exhausted for the week. But Monday, you know, they probably got held up because the Ukrainians blew up those 1,500 Shaheds in Donetsk. So that'll set you back. That'll set you back a day or two. What weapons does Ukraine need to win? As I understand it, the principal need is for air defense so that this becomes a less deadly nightly occurrence. And so that we can keep the heat on and the lights on, etc. Did I tell you what my buddy Maxime wrote the other day? So the heat finally came on for him. The electricity was on. And he wrote on Facebook, "The heat is on, the lamp is light. We stand with them that fix and fight." And I thought that was great. I thought that pretty much summed things up here. So the first thing is air defense. The other thing is long-range weapons that can damage Russia's infrastructure. The drone plants, take out the drone plants. Heavy payload, long-range weapons. He wants the military abroad not to vote. That's crazy because the military overwhelmingly votes Republican. Did you hear about Russian soldiers not getting paid in one province, tip of the iceberg? Well, I mean, we've had reports of that for a long time. That's another reason why they're not worried about casualty figures. You don't have to pay the dead. I forget who it was, but a Russian official was actually quoted as saying that you don't have to pay the dead. Okay, we got just 4 minutes left, guys. So again, I want to thank Derek Sands, who is the sponsor of this video. I want to thank Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps groups on the Book of Faces, and of course, the best moderator team on the Tickety Talk. Final thoughts, guys, from anybody, anything? Republicans just want to make it difficult to vote no matter how, always have. You're not wrong. Recruit payments have halved or more even. They have 3 regions have now suspended them completely, despite the fact that under federal law, you have to offer a minimum of 400,000 rubles. That's federal law. But because states are running on such high deficits, in the case of Sakha, their deficit is 10 times what their annual budget deficit was projected to be. And so they have ceased all payments, injury payments, death payments, and sign-up payments. Thanks, everybody. Are they still recruiting prisoners? There are far fewer prisoners to recruit. Could Belarus bail out Russia somehow? No. No way. They just don't have the resources to. Russia made sure of that by keeping them weak. I mean, it's ironic, isn't it? But all evil contains the seeds of its own destruction. And that's a great example of that. Why not destroying the Kerch Bridge? It would be a good prize to... Yeah, Spear Point, because they want a pressure release valve. There are about 800,000, as I understand it, the most recent figure. It was about 2 million Russian colonists who moved to Crimea since 2014. We think a little over half of them have gone back to Russia now. The Ukrainians want the other 800,000 to leave before they try to take Crimea. They do not want a large Russian civilian population there. And if the only out you leave them is the Mariupol road, a lot of people will stay put instead of risking that. Hi, Carol. Make them swim. Ballistics on their way to Kyiv. Not surprising. Thanks, Guard. Thanks for tuning in. Ballistics, ballistics, ballistics. Ballistics. Okay. I don't know if you can hear that. There was a rolling, echoing bang. It sounded very far away, probably an interception outside the city. It has started, yep. All right. Well, it's just about top of the hour, so let's call it a night. Boom, boom. Hopefully I get some sleep tonight. All right, kids. Thanks so much for hanging out. And have a pleasant evening and sunshiny tomorrow. Thanks.